Imagine waiting at a freezing bus stop in the middle of the night, holding nothing but your crying baby in your trembling arms while the world walks past without a glance. And suddenly, a black car stops. The tinted window rolls down, and a deep voice says two words that will change your entire life forever. Come with me. This story will break your heart, twist your soul, and then rebuild your faith in humanity. So stick with me till the very end, because every 2 minutes a new secret will surface, and every turn will shock you harder than the last. And before we dive into this roller coaster, I need you to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join a family where every story grips you, shakes you, and leaves you gasping for more. Now let's begin. The night was merciless. The streets of the city glittered with frost under the dim yellow glow of flickering lamps, and Emma stood there at the bus stop, her body shivering violently, her arms wrapped protectively around her baby. Daniel, whose weak cries pierced the silence with heartbreaking desperation. Emma had been on her feet for hours, wandering without direction after her landlord had thrown her belongings into the snow, screaming that if she could not pay rent, then she could not stay in his building. Her baby's blanket was thin, her own coat was torn at the sleeves, and her shoes soaked through. Every breath came out in a mist, and she prayed that somehow a miracle would appear, because the timetable on the broken bus stop sign made it clear no bus would arrive tonight. Not here, not at this hour, not in this neighborhood where the city's forgotten gathered. Emma rocked Daniel against her chest, whispering, "Shh, Mama's here. Mama won't let anything happen." But inside her chest, panic clawed with icy fingers. What if the baby froze? What if he stopped breathing right here in her arms? She blinked back tears and tilted her head to the sky, searching for stars, but the clouds had swallowed them whole. Then headlights swept across the pavement, a black luxury car slowing as it approached the empty stop. Emma stiffened, pulling Daniel tighter. The car's engine purred too smooth, too expensive for this part of town. The tinted window lowered, revealing a man inside. His face was partially shadowed, but his eyes glowed under the dim light, sharp, intense, commanding, and dangerous. He studied her for a moment, then his lips parted and his voice, deep and calm, carried across the cold wind. "Come with me." Emma's breath caught fear spiking in her veins. Who was he? Why would a man like that stop for her? Was he a predator? Was this a trap? She backed a step, her heart pounding, but her legs threatened to buckle under exhaustion. The man leaned closer, his features coming into view, a strong jaw, perfectly cut cheekbones, dark hair slicked back, though slightly tousled from the night. His suit was black-tailored, clearly expensive, but the tie hung loose, the collar unbuttoned. He did not look drunk. He did not look desperate. He looked like a man used to being obeyed. Emma whispered, her voice breaking, "Why are you stopping?" The man's gaze flicked to Daniel, then back to her. "Because if you stay out here tonight, you and your child will not make it. My conscience will not allow me to drive past again." Mini suspense beat. Emma's pulse raced, every instinct screamed to run to protect herself from strangers, but the icy wind pierced deeper. Daniel whimpered louder, his tiny fists beating weakly. At her chest, the man stepped out of the car, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. Beneath the harsh streetlight, his presence was overwhelming yet not threatening. He spoke again, softer but steady. "I won't hurt you. I know you're afraid, but I swear on everything I have and everything I lost that your baby is safe with me. Come with me." Emma's eyes widened. What did he mean, everything he lost? What pain hid behind that commanding voice? Still doubt gnawed at her, but she could not ignore Daniel's cries, nor the numbness spreading through her fingers. She forced the words out. "If I go with you and you hurt my baby, I will." The man cut her off gently, raising his hand. "You have my word." He opened the rear door of the car, waiting Emma's. Legs trembled, her mind screamed no, but her heart whispered yes. She lowered her head, kissed Daniel's forehead, and stepped inside. The warmth of the leather seats enveloped her instantly. She almost sobbed in relief. The man slid behind the wheel, glancing briefly in the mirror as the car purred forward. Silence filled the cabin, only the baby's soft whimpers echoing. Emma studied his reflection. His face was carved in steel, his jaw clenched, eyes forward, but beneath the harshness lingered something broken. Finally, she whispered, "What's your name?" The man paused, as if unused to answering personal questions, then replied, "Adrian. Adrian Black." Emma gasped. The Adrian Black, CEO of Black Enterprises, whose name filled newspapers as a ruthless tycoon feared by rivals and envied by peers. He was infamous for crushing competitors, cold, calculating, unstoppable. Yet here he was, driving her like a chauffeur without explanation. Emma's mind whirled. Why would a man like him stop for a homeless nurse and her baby? Mini suspense beat. Adrian did not speak again until they left the city behind, skyscrapers fading into quiet roads flanked by tall trees. He finally said, "Where were you going?" Emma bit her lip. "I don't know. I had nowhere. I lost my job at the hospital. My landlord threw me out. I have no family, no one left." Adrian's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. "You were a nurse." Emma nodded slowly. "Until last month they cut staff and I was one of the unlucky ones." Adrian's eyes softened briefly before hardening again. He whispered almost to himself, "A nurse." His fingers tightened on the wheel. Emma leaned forward, curious, but he said nothing else. The drive stretched longer, the world outside silent except for the crunch of snow under the tires. Then looming ahead, massive iron gates swung open automatically, revealing a sprawling estate. Emma gasped, her mouth dry, as the car rolled up a winding driveway flanked by statues, fountains, frozen in mid-splash gardens buried under snow. The mansion that rose before her looked like something from a dream. Marble pillars, glass windows, endless wings glowing under floodlights. She whispered, This is your home." Adrian simply replied, "Yes." Mini suspense beat. Emma clutched. Daniel tighter, anxiety rising. What was happening? Why had he brought her here? Why open his fortress to a stranger? Adrian parked, stepped out and gestured for her to follow. Servants appeared instantly, but at his sharp gesture, they vanished as quickly. Adrian led her inside, towering doors, opening to reveal chandeliers, glittering overhead staircases, spiraling upward, halls stretching into darkness. Emma's breath shook. She felt like an intruder in a world not meant for her. He turned, finally, his face unreadable. "You will stay here tonight. Rooms will be prepared. Food will be brought." "Do not argue," Emma stammered. I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Adrian's eyes darkened, his jaw flexing. "Because I know what it feels like to be left out in the cold. Because I swore if I ever saw someone in that place, I would not walk away. But that's all you need to know for now." He motioned to a maid who appeared carrying fresh blankets and whispered, "Prepare the West Wing." Emma followed, dazed, into a lavish guest room, warmer than anything she had known. She laid Daniel in a crib, brought instantly by staff. Tears filled her eyes. Relief overwhelming, but fear still gnawed. She sank onto the bed, whispering, "Thank you," though she knew he could not hear. Her body begged for rest, but sleep was broken by footsteps outside her door. They paused, lingered, then moved away. Emma held her breath, heart racing. Was it Adrian checking, or someone else in the mansion watching her? Mini suspense. But she would not know tonight. By morning, sunlight filtered through golden curtains. Emma found a tray of food waiting. She ate hungrily, feeding Daniel too. Hours later, a knock came. Adrian stood at the door, his expression unreadable. He said, "Come." Emma followed nervously to a vast dining room. The table stretched endlessly. Adrian sat at the head, distant yet watchful. Emma sat near Daniel in a small chair. Adrian asked abruptly, "Your baby, what is his name?" Emma swallowed Daniel. Adrian repeated, softly, "Daniel." His eyes flickered pain, flashing across his features, as if the name ripped open a wound. Emma tilted her head. Do you have children?" Adrian froze cup halfway to his lips. His silence stretched. Then he said, "One, but he's gone." Emma's heart clenched. She wanted to ask more, but his eyes turned to steel, warning her not to push. Mini suspense beat. What had happened to Adrian's child? Days blurred into weeks. Adrian never explained his motives, yet he provided shelter, warmth, even a private doctor for Daniel. Still, he remained distant, like a fortress. Emma began noticing cracks at night, muffled screams from his study. Once she opened the door to find him staring at a photograph of a woman and child, his hands shaking. He snapped, "Get out!" but his eyes begged for someone to stay. Emma realized Adrian's empire was built on pain, buried so deep it consumed him. She wondered if perhaps her arrival in his life was not chance, but fate. The mansion became both a sanctuary and a prison for Emma, each corridor a reminder of how far she was from her old life and how little she knew about the man who had taken her in. During the day, sunlight filled the glass halls, servants moved, silently obeying Adrian's every glance, yet their eyes often flicked toward her with questions unspoken. Emma could feel the whispers, even when they didn't speak. She was the outsider, the fragile girl who had arrived from the snow carrying nothing. But a baby Adrian never addressed the gossip. He carried himself with a cold authority that silenced everyone around him. But Emma noticed that every time he passed Daniel, he paused his stride just slightly, his eyes softening for a fraction of a second before hardening again, as though he couldn't allow himself to feel too much. Mini suspense beat one evening. As Emma fed Daniel in the guest room, she heard a faint thud from down the hallway. At first she thought it was just the old house, groaning under the winter wind, but then she heard it again, followed by a muffled cry. She set Daniel gently in the crib and tiptoed into the corridor. The sound led her toward the west wing, where the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. She hesitated, hand hovering over a heavy oak door, then slowly pushed it open. Inside, Adrian stood alone, drenched in sweat, his fists clenched as though he had been striking something. His breath came ragged, his eyes wild. He froze when he saw her. "Get out!" His voice thundered through the room. Emma stumbled back, fear surging, but then she saw it behind him on the desk, a photograph of a woman and child framed in silver. The glass cracked. She whispered softly, "Was that your family?" Adrian's shoulders stiffened, his voice lower now. "Don't ask me about them, you wouldn't understand." And he turned away. Emma retreated, but the image burned in her mind and questions gnawed at her. The next morning, Adrian was different. He invited her to breakfast again at the long dining table. His suit was immaculate, his posture perfect, but his eyes were shadowed. He asked abruptly, "You said you were a nurse." "How long?" Emma answered. 5 years. I worked at St. Mary's Hospital pediatric ward. I loved it until the funding cuts. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Pediatric." He trailed off, lost in thought. Emma waited, then asked carefully, "Did your child, was he sick?" Adrian's spoon clattered against the bowl. His gaze shot to her, sharp as glass. "Enough." His voice was final, but his hands trembled. He left the table abruptly, leaving Emma shaken. Mini suspense beat. The truth was close, but locked behind walls he was terrified to let fall. Days turned into weeks. Emma began settling into the mansion, though uncertainty always lingered. She explored gardens wrapped in frost, endless libraries lined with books, a music hall filled with a grand piano yet lifeless. Adrian appeared only in fragments, passing in silence, retreating into his study or leaving for meetings that stretched into the night. Still, small gestures revealed cracks in his armor. Once she found Daniel's crib moved closer to the fireplace, though she hadn't done it. Another time, she discovered a new set of warm clothes folded neatly on her. Bed gifts. No one admitted to leaving late at night when Daniel cried. She sometimes glimpsed Adrian standing at the doorway, watching his tiny chest rise and fall before disappearing like a ghost. Mini suspense beat. One stormy evening, Emma sat in the library reading when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Adrian, but found a woman she had never seen, elegant in a fur coat, her smile sharp as a knife. "Who are you?" the woman demanded, her eyes raking over Emma and then the baby. In the crib nearby, before Emma could answer, Adrian appeared, his face dark with fury. "Leave," he barked. The woman's smile faltered. Adrian's voice dropped colder than ice. "I said, leave. Now." The woman scowled, brushed past Emma, and stormed out. Adrian sank into a chair, running a hand through his hair. Emma asked, trembling, "Who was that?" Adrian's answer came heavy. "My sister. She doesn't approve of you being here. She thinks you're after something." Emma's heart ached. "But I'm not Adrian." Met her gaze, something unreadable flickering there. "I know." From that night suspicion grew. The servants whispered louder. The board members of his company began calling, pressing Adrian for meetings. He grew harsher, colder, yet every time Emma considered leaving, he stopped her with a single look, as if silently begging her to stay. Mini suspense beat. One night, Daniel's cries pierced the mansion louder than usual. Emma rushed to the nursery, only to find the crib empty. Panic seized her chest. She screamed his name, tearing through rooms, until she heard a faint wail from the study. She burst inside. Adrian stood there holding Daniel, rocking him gently. His face softened in a way she had never seen. He looked up, startled, Emma's fear turning into relief and then confusion. "Why did you take him?" Adrian's voice cracked. I needed to remember." Emma frowned. "Remember what?" Adrian placed Daniel back in her arms and whispered low enough for only her to hear. "The sound of my own son's breathing." He walked past her, leaving Emma trembling. The walls around his past began to crumble piece by piece. Emma learned from overheard conversations that Adrian had once been married, that tragedy had struck years ago, but no one dared speak of it in his presence. She pieced together fragments: the photograph, the pain in his eyes, the whispers about an accident. The realization settled heavy. Adrian had lost his family, and perhaps saving her at the bus stop was his attempt to rewrite a moment he could never change. But Emma also sensed danger, because in his world, power was everything and weakness was blood in the water. Mini suspense beat. Danger struck sooner than she expected. Late one night, as Emma lulled Daniel to sleep, a shadow crossed her window. She froze, pulling the curtain aside, but saw nothing. Minutes later, she heard glass shatter downstairs. Adrian's furious shout followed by a crash. Emma grabbed Daniel, clutching him tight as the mansion erupted in chaos. Guards thundered through halls. Lights blazed. Adrian burst into her room, his face carved in fury. "Stay here, don't move," she begged. "What's happening?" he barked. "Just do as I say." Then he was gone. The shouts lasted minutes that felt like hours when silence finally returned. Adrian returned too, his hands streaked with blood, not his own. His eyes burned with rage. He slammed the door shut behind him. Emma whispered, horrified. "What was that?" Adrian's voice was gravel, a warning from people who would rather see me destroyed, and now they know you and the baby are my weakness. Emma's knees buckled. She sank onto the bed, clutching Daniel. Adrian knelt before her for the first time, not as a CEO, not as a commanding figure, but as a broken, "Man, I won't let anyone take you from me, not like before." Emma's voice shook. Before he looked away, jaw tight but pain clear. "My wife and son a car crashed 10 years ago. I wasn't there. I thought money could fix everything. But when it mattered, I wasn't there to protect them. I swore never again. When I saw you at that bus stop, I saw them. I couldn't walk away." Emma's tears blurred her vision. The pieces fell together. Adrian's haunted eyes, his silent kindness, his unbearable guilt. She reached out hesitantly, resting a hand on his shoulder, whispering, "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Adrian closed his eyes for a moment, leaning into her touch before standing again, walls rising but cracks still showing. The storm that had hovered over the mansion for days finally began to break, yet the sense of unease inside Adrian's heart only grew heavier as Emma's presence in his life continued to pull back the curtains on secrets he had tried to bury for years. And though the baby's laughter had begun to echo in the cold hallways, filling them with warmth that had not existed for years, shadows still crept close, and Adrian knew danger was approaching, even if Emma could not yet see it. She only saw the tenderness in the way he sometimes looked at her child, the unspoken longing in his eyes, the kind of gaze a man carried when he had lost something precious and feared losing it again. But this chapter of their lives was not to be written with gentle smiles alone, for just as dawn rose over the vast gardens, trouble came riding with it. And it began when Emma noticed a black car parked too long outside the mansion gates, its tinted windows making it impossible to know who sat within. As if someone was watching, waiting, measuring their every move, Emma clutched her baby close, feeling that familiar sting of fear from the bus stop nights ago, and whispered to Adrian what she saw. His face tightened instantly, his jaw locked, and without a word he ordered his guards to double their patrols around the estate. But even as he tried to calm her, his silence told her what she feared most, that the danger was real, not paranoia, and it was closer than she thought. That evening, as golden light spilled across the mansion's polished floors, Adrian dressed for a critical board meeting, one that could decide the future of his empire. Emma watched from the stairs, holding her baby in her arms. She could sense the weight pressing on him, though he tried to disguise it behind his suit and tie. When he caught her gaze, he almost softened, and with a rare gentleness, he whispered, "Stay close to the baby, and trust no one." Tonight, his words lingered like a warning as he left the mansion, stepping into his sleek black car and driving toward the skyscrapers that housed his empire. And for the first time, Emma realized just how many enemies a man like him must have made over the years. Inside the mansion, silence fell heavy until the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Emma turned her head quickly but saw no one. Only the flicker of a light from the far end of the corridor. She told herself it was her imagination. Yet when she went back to the nursery, she noticed the window slightly ajar, the curtains trembling, as though someone had been there watching. She shut it firmly and held her baby tighter. But her heart beat fast, for she knew instinctively that someone had touched the room where her child slept, and she did not trust coincidence. Meanwhile, Adrian entered the boardroom, where polished men and women sat around a long glass table, their eyes sharp with greed, their smiles empty. He stood at the head of the table, commanding the space. Yet they spoke to him with thinly veiled hostility, pushing contracts across the table that would strip him of power. And Adrian, though calm, knew they were vultures circling, waiting for the moment he showed weakness. One man in particular leaned forward, his voice smooth as silk yet dangerous as a knife, saying, "Sign this, Adrian. It is the only way to save what is left." Adrian looked him dead in the eye and replied, "I would rather lose everything than give my empire to traitors." And though his voice was steady, his heart pounded with thoughts of Emma and the baby left behind in the mansion. Back at the estate, Emma walked through the dimly lit hallways, sensing she was not alone. Whispers floated through the kitchen as two maids exchanged hurried words, their eyes darting to her before quickly looking away. Emma's chest tightened. She realized not everyone in this mansion could be trusted, and when she heard a faint creak from upstairs, she nearly dropped the bottle in her hand, rushing to the nursery only to find her baby safe asleep. Yet the rocking chair beside the crib was moving slightly, as though someone had just left it. She froze, cold sweat trickling down her spine, and whispered to herself, "Someone is here." Her fear became reality. When night fell fully and the guards shouted from outside, heavy thuds rattling against the gate, Adrian's enemies had made their move, masked intruders forcing their way past the fences. Lightning split the sky, illuminating dark figures sprinting. Across the gardens, Emma clutched her baby and pressed herself against the wall, trembling as footsteps thundered through the mansion halls. Doors slammed, voices shouted orders, chaos consuming the quiet luxury she had grown used to. But even in her terror, she refused to abandon her child instead. She darted into a hidden pantry she had noticed days ago, sealing the door from inside, praying the baby would stay quiet. Adrian's car screeched into the driveway, just as the chaos reached its peak. He stormed inside, his mansion, fists clenched, eyes blazing, his guards already battling intruders in the foyer, furniture crashing, chandeliers swaying from the shock. Adrian joined the fray, his strength and rage making him a force to fear. He tore the mask off one attacker and gasped in fury. It was a man he once called a friend, a business partner who had betrayed him for power and money. Adrian slammed him against the wall, demanding, "Who sent you?" But the man only sneered, spitting blood and muttering, "Your empire will fall tonight." Emma, meanwhile, could barely breathe inside her hiding place. She heard every crash, every cry. Her baby whimpered softly, and she kissed his forehead, whispering, "Please, stay quiet. Please, stay safe." Then suddenly, the pantry door rattled violently, a hand tugging at it from the outside. She almost screamed, but at that very moment, Adrian burst into the hall, roaring with rage, his fists connecting with the intruder's jaw, sending him crashing into the wall. Adrian pulled open the pantry and saw Emma clutching the baby, her eyes wide with terror. And in that instant, something inside him broke. He swore to himself he would never again allow harm to come to her or that child. The battle ended with Adrian's men overpowering the intruders, but the damage was done. The mansion had been breached, and Emma realized the cost of living in his world was not just luxury, but constant danger. Later that night, as she sat by the fireplace, still trembling, Adrian approached, kneeling in front of her with uncharacteristic vulnerability, his suit torn, his hands bruised. He whispered, "I cannot promise you a safe life, Emma, but I can promise you that I will fight every day to protect you and your child." She looked at him, tears streaming down her cheeks, and for the first time she saw not the cold CEO the world feared, but a broken man searching for redemption. Days later, Adrian faced the board once again, this time not as a man cornered, but as a man reborn. He refused their deals, exposed their corruption, and declared he would rebuild his empire on his own terms. The same men who had mocked him now stared in silence, for they had underestimated him. Emma's presence had changed him, given him courage. He had lost, and though they plotted in shadows, Adrian left the room victorious, his mind set on the family waiting for him at home. The final night of that chapter was not filled with thunder or betrayal, but peace, as Emma tucked her baby into the crib. Adrian entered quietly, carrying a small teddy bear in his hands, awkwardly placing it beside the child. Emma smiled softly, watching this man who had once been all steel and ice, now showing cracks of tenderness. He sat beside her, whispering, "I never thought I would find light again, but you brought it to me, Emma. You and this child." She reached out, taking his hand, and together they sat in silence, the fire crackling beside them. the mansion no longer a cold fortress, but a home filled with hope. As dawn broke, Adrian, Emma, and the baby walked together through the mansion gardens, golden sunlight pouring over them, the scars of the night before still fresh. Yet the promise of tomorrow, stronger Adrian no longer walked alone. Emma, no longer trembled in the cold, and the child no longer cried in fear. For though their story had begun at a lonely bus stop on a stormy night, it had grown into something far greater, a tale of trust, love, redemption, and the courage to start again. And as the camera of this story pulls away, the three of them become smaller figures against the vast beauty of the morning. Yet their bond burns brighter than any storm, and so ends this chapter. But not the journey ahead, for every ending is only the beginning of another.